Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Ma'alim.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So just like what we did last week, we're going to try to get understanding about Hadith. You can call it so if I start again, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. So this is only an introduction to the sciences of Hadith, like we learned last lesson about the sciences of Quran. So this is Ulum al-Hadith or Mustalah Hadith. Obviously, this is only an introduction, but this is a subject in itself. So the first question is, what is Hadith? You all know what a Hadith is, but to give it a broader definition. So Hadith is like the statements that are recorded of the Prophet ﷺ, his actions, his approval, are all a part of Hadith. So it says it's the second source, Islamic law, and it can actually have the same legal ranking as the Quran, because there's some laws which are in the Hadith and not in the Quran. Okay, so there's developed like a science of Hadith where they're able to use some principles to evaluate if the Hadith is authentic or not. So from that, you understand not every Hadith you hear is authentic. So you should hear the source, or it should be a Hadith which is known. Now, it's obviously different to the Quran, because when you hear the Quran, you know it's authentic, and you don't need to ask about the Quran. Okay. As for the Hadith, but we need to also know the importance of Hadith, because some people, there's actually a group even today, they're called the Quraniyun, and they don't believe in Hadith. I remember making Hajj with one of them. It was in the group that we were performing Hajj with, and he was saying he doesn't believe the Hadith. Although he was a revert, but he was saying, probably the people who made him Muslim were on that kind of ideology. And I was saying to him that how are you going to pray Salah and how are you going to fast, the details of how to fast and all of that. So the Hadith is important to know that. First of all, it's a revelation. The Prophet ﷺ said, I've been given something similar to the Quran and something like it, which is the Hadith. And we already learned that. And also explains the Quran. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. So Muhammad ﷺ was explaining the Quran through his actions and through his words. Also the laws. You need the Quran and the Hadith to govern a state as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنكُمْ. Follow Allah and obey His Messenger and those who have authority among you. So فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. If you differ between within yourselves, then go back to Allah and His Messenger, which is the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, also the Quran, the Hadith is like a moral ideal guide for us. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get confused. I'm not going to teach what you sorry, just okay. So also, because of the Hadith, like this science of Hadith, it also kind of preserved the religion, because then anybody will interpret the Quran as he wants. So it's important to have a system to preserve the Hadith as well, or the authentic Hadith. So as we saw, like Muslims were having problems. There was turmoil, disorder after the death of Uthman, the third Khalifa. There was these wars between Ali and Aisha and Muawiyah. We saw how there was different groups that developed. Shia, the Khawarij. So they started to, these political differences, it caused people to make fake hadith as well. So they started making fake hadith, like to support Ali, is to support Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family, and so the Shia were coming about, the Khawarij. Also the philosophical movements, because the next empire, the Islamic empire, which is the Umayyad Caliphate, which starts with Muawiyah, and then after the next empire, we're going to learn about, inshallah, the Abbas Empire. It expanded into other different areas, and obviously with new people coming into the Muslim community, and then some of them were using logic to understand certain things you're not supposed to understand, with like Allah's names and attributes. How does Allah hear everything? How does Allah see everything? And so they were using philosophy and logic to understand the Quran and Sunnah, or the Quran, and that created different groups. So there was a problem. So that's why they made fake hadith as well. Some people who apostated, became non-Muslim, they started to make fake hadith as well to cause problems within the Muslims. Some people like storytellers, and they just add a lot of lies into their stories to make it sound nicer. So they make fake hadiths, and they used to earn a livelihood from that. Some people were like ignorant ascetics, yeah. So they would make up fake hadiths to make people afraid of doing evil deeds. They're like, if you do this, you'll have a snake come to your grave and will be biting you. There is a hadith regarding that for the person who doesn't pray salah, but they used to make a lot of fake things, fake hadiths. Or if you read this dua this many times, you get this and all of that. And they thought they were doing something good, but they were making lies. Then you have nationalism and factionalism. So some people, to support their areas like Basra or Jeddah or Constantinople, they would make a fake hadith to kind of promote their town. Some people just made lies. Say if somebody wanted to sell bananas, he would make a fake hadith saying, well, whoever eats bananas, he's going to get this, and fake hadiths. Some wise words will turn into hadith, like go and seek knowledge, even if it's in China. That's not a hadith, this is a wise word. It could be a wise word of a tabi'i or another scholar, but it wasn't a hadith. Also, people made a lot of fake hadiths when it came to tafsir, to come up with a lot of fake stories. So this is what caused the problems. Like, you can't just take any hadith you hear. So when it reached that stage, there were scholars who were coming about, and before, at the beginning, they were just saying, and they would not ask about the chain of narrators. They would just ask about the hadith. And then he said, when the fitna happened, so the civil war, they were asking, now name your men. Who are you narrating this hadith from? So if he's narrating from people that they know, that are reliable, they will take it. If it was like Shia or Khawarij, they wouldn't take it. Is that clear? Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, you probably seen many, because you've been learning hadith a lot. Every hadith has two parts. There's the first part, it says, Abu Huraira narrated from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes it could be Aban narrated from Uthman. So you could have three names normally, but the chain obviously goes back all the way to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to the person who recorded it. So that part is called the chain. It's the first part. The other part is called the matan, which is the text of the hadith. Now, this is where the science of hadith actually comes into. So, if you can see my screen, it says here, حدثنا علي بن عبد الله حدثنا أبو سامة قال أخبرني هشام عن أبيه عن عائشة رضي الله. So, Ali ibn Abi Abdullah narrates from Abu Usama, who said, Hisham told me from his father, who is reported from Aisha. These are names. And that's a chain, basically. Obviously, the chain is a lot longer than that, but that's what they mention in their books. You can find the full chain. It says that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to like eating sweets and honey, sweet things. So you can actually check this hadith even for yourself. And if you look at the chain, this is the chain. So Aisha narrates from, if you want, you can start from Bukhari. So we know Bukhari, you know the authentic book of Bukhari. He heard this hadith from the Ali, son of Abdullah, and he heard it from Abu Usama. Abu Usama heard it from Hisham. Hisham heard it from Urwa. Urwa heard it from Aisha. So probably in the hadith, we only had 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 4, isn't it? But then Abu Usama, who was basically the fourth one, he had many students. So many students narrated from him. And then his students, so another sheikh recorded in his book, Ibn Majah. And then Bukhari doesn't have only one person who is getting the hadith from, he's got another chain as well. That makes it stronger. He put a lot of effort into his book. We're going to see it's the most authentic book. So the chain gets more confusing. This is how it would look like. For example, if you look at not only one book, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books, it could be the same hadith narrated by 5 different sheikhs in different books. Each one has got his own chain, or you can have the same chain. You see? So it could get more confusing. But then every single person in this chain, his name is recorded. We're going to look at that, his biographical dictionaries. So if there was a problem in the hadith, in the chain, like we're going to see, they never used to take it. What problems could there be in the chain? So for example, here from the chain could go up to, so we have hadith Qudsi, Marfu', depending on where it stops. Okay? So if I even show you from here. For example, if it's Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, I heard, Allah said this, and it's hadith Qudsi. It's not Quran, but hadith Qudsi. So it's hadith Qudsi. If the person, Bukhari, mentions it until it reaches Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's called Marfu'. If it stops at a companion and he doesn't mention Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's called Mawquf. So it's a wording of the companion. If it stops at successor of the companion, it's called Mawqu'. And like that, it had names for everything, basically. They know exactly where the hadith stopped. And then they would look at the narrators as well. They would say, if it's narrated by one person, it's called ahad. So if there's, for example, 2 on every level, it's called gharib. If there's 3 on every level, 4 on every level, or basically, beginning was narrated by one person, and then there was different levels. Mutawatir is when it's narrated by many companions, or many on the second level, followers of the companions. Okay, also the matan and sanad. So basically, the hadith at the end, it could have a problem. It could be irregular. It's like it's not, basically, it kind of contradicts, or it's something only one person mentioned. It could be munkar, so they don't accept it. It could be kind of mixed. Some kind of hadiths are mixed. The narrator kind of mixed it up, so they can find that out. And then also the hadith would either be accepted or would be rejected. If it's accepted, it takes 2 categories. It could be sahih, which is sound, and hasan. It could be hasan, good. And if it's rejected, then obviously there's different levels why it's rejected. It could be rejected because the chain, has many other reasons why it's rejected. One of them that is completely made up. So I'm not going to go into that. Okay, so are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was hadith recorded at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It wasn't recorded because they were focusing on recording the Quran. He ascribes for that. But there was one source where somebody asked, Ya Rasulullah, can somebody write it for me? Somebody wrote it for him. So it wasn't really recorded. But the companions, they actually kept their own documents. So they would record hadith as well. Okay? Sometimes it was recorded as like maghazi. They would know like events that took place, like the Battle of Badr, this happened, and they would mention hadith. It was a historical book. At the time of the Tabi'in and the Atba'u Tabi'in, so during that period, the next 2 generations, they were kind of recorded, and they became like fiqh books. Okay? So like Muwatta ibn Malik, he was recording his book, but it was also a hadith book really. So it had hadith and it had rulings and all of that. And Shafi'i as well, he was recording his book. We're going to learn about them, the schools of thought. And so basically that was the next era. We're going to look. Then after that, they were recorded as Musnad as well. So like Musnad Imam Ahmed, there was every companion, for example, had a different section. So everything Abu Hurairah narrated in one place, everything Abu Bakr narrated like that. And then there was the Musannaf. So the Musannaf was like Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Jami' Tirmidhi, and the books and the 6 books. We're going to look at them, inshallah. And the Sunan works as well included the ones I've just mentioned. But Sunan books were more like general. They covered everything about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, the tafsir, the battles and everything. Okay. What about if there was a conflict between the hadith? Okay, so they will try to reconcile between the hadith. Okay, so for example, we learn about how if you're using the toilet, you shouldn't face the qibla. Okay, so one time Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was using the toilet, but he's facing his back to the toilet. Facing his back to the qibla. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in his wording, don't face to the qibla when you're urinating or defecating, and don't face your back to the qibla. Okay? So one time a companion saw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam facing his back to the qibla. So that then will bring a different opinion. How do you reconcile between these two hadith? One says you shouldn't do it, and one says you can, with your back facing the qibla. So some of them said one hadith is general and one is specific. So he said, okay, the specific one is that you can face your back to the qibla if you're in a building. But someone said, yeah, if you're in a building, you can face your back to the qibla. But if you're not in a building and you're in the open, you can't. So that's how they kind of reconcile between them. Some of them will choose one hadith over the other. For example, there might be a hadith which says eating camel meat breaks your wudu. Okay? And then another hadith would say anything that fire has touched. At the beginning, it breaks your wudu, and then later on they said it doesn't break your wudu. So basically, even if you use the same hadith we're talking about, like using the toilet, some of them said, okay, one hadith, they might say it's weak, and the other one is authentic. Okay, but really they have to study the chain anyway. But that's what causes difference of opinion. Is that clear? You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Another one is they might come up and say they will not try to reconcile between two hadiths, but they will take one and say that one applies, the other one is abrogated. So some people might say facing your back to the qibla, it's allowed. That law has been, it was a law that was there before, but then that law has been changed now. So different ways of kind of reconciling between the hadiths. If I go back to, so there was a criticism of hadith. They would compare between the hadiths, the students, all the students, they would check what each student mentioned, and if it's the same, they would check that same sheikh, was he saying the same thing throughout his whole life? Sometimes they get old and they might kind of mix the hadiths up. They would double check that. They would check if he was writing it or if it was oral transmission. There's wording to show that. They also compare between the Quran and hadith. There's no conflict. Okay, so were they using logic? They had to kind of avoid using logic, because using, like a lot of modernists now, they would use logic and say, oh, we can't accept this hadith because it goes against logic. Like, for example, certain things to do with like, the capital punishments and all of that, and they'll try to use logic. So you can't use logic to reject the hadith, because Muhammad Ali radiallahu anhu said, if we were able to, if Islam was all about logic, then we will be wiping the bottom of the feet when we're making wudu instead of the top. If you're wearing socks, you'd wipe the bottom instead of the top, because the bottom gets dirty. So this is what modernists do. You can't really do that to reject the hadith. Okay, so what happened was, over time, there were some sheikhs who was actually recording. They started to record every single narrator into a biography, a dictionary. Every person, even today, you can check these books, Asma' al-Rijal, Kutub al-Rijal. You can actually search every single person in that chain and find out how his memory was, where he lived, if it was possible for him to meet so and so and like that. You can find out his students, his teachers. Okay, so these are the 6 famous books now, which are accepted by the Muslims, and there's some others. Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, Tirmidhi, and Sunnah Abi Dawood, Ibn Nisai, Ibn Majah. They've been translated to English, and you can even find them on this website, sunnah.com. I use a lot. And this sheikh is a contemporary sheikh. His name is Sheikh Albani. You probably heard people say, yes, Sheikh Albani said it's authentic. So he's a contemporary sheikh who passed away in the, I think, 2000s. And he made an effort to check all the hadiths that have been narrated and then give them a grade. So you don't really need to do that for Bukhari and Muslim, but for the others, we needed that. And it was done by other scholars before him as well. So what is the most authentic hadiths? So some people said Muwatta ibn Malik, first category, Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim. So Muwatta was the most authentic at his time, but then obviously Sahih Bukhari and Muslim is more authentic than his one. But if you have Sahih Bukhari, you don't really need to ask about its authenticity, and Sahih Muslim as well. And obviously, if they both narrate the same hadith, that's the strongest. Then it's the next books. So the 4 books we're going to look at, and those you have to double check. So you have Sahih Bukhari. You can look at some of the history. So surprisingly, all of them are Persian. So Bukhari, he was a Persian, and we're going to look at their history, inshallah. And Sahih Muslim, he was also from Nishapur, and Abu Dawood as well. Tirmidhi, they were all from that kind of area, Azerbaijan, Khorasan. And if you look at, so there's the 6 famous books, but this one is also Muwatta Malik. That was one of the first ones, and he was settled in Medina. And we're going to learn about Malik as well, because he has a school of thought. So he spent all his time in Medina, and he would narrate from this freed slave of Abdullah ibn Umar. So Abdullah ibn Umar was a companion. He taught his freed slave Nafi', and then Malik was his student. So his book is obviously his book has weak hadith as well, so you have to double check. Then there's the Musnad Ahmed. Ahmed also, he came after a lot of these sheikhs, but he organized it according to the Muslim style. So he traveled to Basra, Kufa, Yemen. His book has authentic hadith and also fabricated hadith. So he was like a student of, he even met Imam Shafi'i and other scholars. Okay, we're going to look at the most famous one, which is Bukhari. Bukhari, his name is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. Was born in Bukhara, is a Persian origin. And whenever he learned the Quran, and by the time he was 15, he was like a scholar, because he was correcting his own sheikh. And he basically traveled so many places to collect the hadith. He collected 600,000 hadith. He only chose 9,082 hadith to put in his book. And out of those, some of them are actually repeated, because they have different chains. So his book is the most authentic. And then you have, if I go down, Sahih Muslim. So he was also he was living the same time as Bukhari. And so he traveled as well. And yeah, so he traveled as well. And his book is very similar to Bukhari's. And they were all thinking about having a book which was authentic. Sunnah Abi Dawood, he selected from 500,000 hadith. He only selected 4,800 for his book. Okay? And so he said that his father was he was from the tribe of Azd tribe. Anyway, maybe, yeah, he's from the, again, Sajistan, Khorasan area. Tirmidhi, also, he had 3,956 hadith in his book. Okay, and he was someone who is also a scholar, and he was a student of Bukhari. Okay, and Nisa'i also, he compiled his famous book. You can read, I think, this by yourselves later on. So he compiled 2 books, but the last one is authentic. But obviously there are some weak hadiths as well. So when you come to these books, you have to check. It will say at the bottom, Sahih or weak. Sunnah ibn Majah was also traveled to all these different places: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Egypt. And in his book, he's got 4,341 hadiths. Obviously, there are some weak hadiths. Okay. And he's got almost here, it says 613 weak hadiths and 99 which are fabricated. So you have to be careful, check what's the authenticity before you just take the hadith. So these are the famous hadith books. I think it just kind of gives you an idea, like the effort the Muslims have put into that we get the correct hadith and the correct source for our deen and to practice. Wallahu a'lam. Obviously, this is something that we can't cover intensively because this is taught in universities, it's taught as a whole subject. Okay, like some of these sheikhs, when they're compiling their books, they spend 20 years just collecting the hadiths. There's many stories, a lot to mention, but I'm just mentioning, just giving you a brief introduction, inshallah. Allahu a'lam. You have any questions?
No.
No questions? I didn't record the lesson today. That's fine. Okay. But yeah, what do you learn from the lesson then? What do you benefit from the lesson?
I learned all the different types of people who make like fake hadiths.